You're sitting in a hospital room with Roshi watching the news as you see that King Piccolo's spawn are still out there, killing all sorts of martial artists for their now dead father. You might have killed King Piccolo, although his kids are still out there, at least until Goku and Yajirobe as a tag team are able to take down most of them. Although there is still one that only you knew existed, the last heir to the demon's throne, and he wasn't even born yet. He was still incubating inside an egg, waiting to hatch and take over the world he was destined to. You rush back to the place where the egg was left. You would see King Piccolo's bloody husk still there, and the egg sitting only a couple meters away. Now you're faced with the nature versus nurture argument. Sure, he might be born evil, although there is a chance he could turn out to be good. All of Piccolo's other spawn were raised by him, if only for a very short period. If there's even the slightest chance that this kid could be a good guy, then he'd be the best hero the Earth could ever ask for. Although on the off chance that he is born evil, it would make more sense to take him out now. But you don't have long to rest on this moral dilemma, as soon the egg begins to hatch, cracking open as a tiny baby Piccolo is revealed. For some reason, he was born with clothes on, although for a being that has clothes beam, at least later on, it does make sense, and I'm certainly not complaining. Another strange fact that you would pick up on is he's fully conscious, as well as hyper-intelligent for what is basically an infant. He would claim to be the Demon King Piccolo's reincarnation, although you're not buying it. He seems rather docile in comparison to the other Piccolo. Sure, he was a bit rowdy and did try to kill you a couple of times, but you were able to evade him. He's far weaker than his dad, at least for now. Give it a couple years and he'll definitely surpass the Demon King, although at the moment you two are pretty equal, you're just more mobile. On top of that, the other Piccolo was much more villainous, whereas this guy is kinda like a 5-year-old playing police officer. He's trying to be the malicious king of the demons, but it's just not working. You can see that shimmer of good in Piccolo Jr. He's the son of the Demon King, not his reincarnation. You want to foster the light you can see inside of him, so you ask if he wants to go get some food. He did just pop out of an egg after all, and that probably makes you pretty hungry. He says that he does require sustenance, although he's not hungry. Instead, he's thirsty. So you would offer to go get the two of you some milkshakes, and he would agree. You would head to some random fast food place and pick up some milkshakes and some burgers, then heading back to the hospital where Roshi was. As his energy restored, his body was beginning to recover, so he was now able to chew solid food, and was eating the hell out of those burgers. You would debate telling Roshi about Piccolo Jr., although you realize that's probably not the best idea. You would have the young Namekian wait outside, that way there was no immediate conflict between him and Roshi. Although you would come to realize maybe it's best to keep it that way, having the two have no contact, at least until you're able to prove that Piccolo can reform. The Dragon Balls that King Piccolo had gathered but yet to be able to use would then be utilized by the Z-Fighters, summoning Shinron and having everybody that King Piccolo killed being brought back to life. Through this noble wish, alongside the fact that Goku had taken down most of King Piccolo's kids, Kami would offer to train him. And so, obviously, the young Saiyan would agree. Obviously, Kami would consider training you, although you seem to have your hands full training under Master Roshi, as well as trying to reform Piccolo. For now, he'll give you time to do your own thing, although in the future, if you're successful, then he'll definitely offer you training. For the next 3 years, you would find a pretty good balance between training at the Turtle School and hanging out with Piccolo. The two of you looked about the same age after only 2 years. Namekians apparently grow incredibly quickly. It doesn't really matter though, you don't want to introduce Piccolo to the group because you are still afraid of how everybody will react. He's definitely not a full-blown good guy now, although you would consider him at least neutral. It was a long and bumpy process, but you were able to uproot all of the negative influence that his father had over him. It turns out that all Piccolo needed was a friend, and now he's at least a somewhat good dude. The time would come for the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai, and now you are finally ready to introduce Piccolo to everybody else. But you don't just introduce Piccolo to everybody else right away. Instead, you give it a minute. You let everybody ease into knowing Piccolo without knowing who he is. You give him a mask, some way to hide his identity, that way everybody can get to know him with an unbiased outlook. Everybody from the original would begin to recollect, meeting each other yet again and being surprised at just how much everybody has grown. You would leave Piccolo to make small talk with everybody else while you begin talking to Bulma, someone you immediately take interest in.
So, do you like water?
I mean, yeah, you kinda needed to live, you know?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Alright, I'm gonna go.
The first match is between Piccolo and Krillin, and although the winner might seem obvious, to be fair it is, it's not as much as you might think. Piccolo is about as strong as he was originally, although Krillin is much stronger. The reason that the Z Fighters fell so far behind in the original was because there was no bridge between the godlike fighters and the regular humans, although here, you are that bridge. You trained with Piccolo, and then you went right back to sparring with Krillin and Roshi at the Turtle School. Hell, even Yamcha got a few licks in. So sure, Krillin might not be the strongest fighter in the world, but he can at least hold his own with Piccolo. He does still lose though, so we're on to our next match between Goku and Tien Shinhan, which is also much closer than you might suspect. See, Goku never drank the Ultra Divine Water, meaning he started his training off weaker, as well as the fact he didn't fight King Piccolo, and thus didn't have as much of a goal to strive for. I can hear all of you absolute buffoons in the comments right now, saying that Goku doesn't need a goal to get stronger. He was taught by Roshi to always improve oneself and never think of yourself the strongest, but that's not what I'm getting at. Characters in Dragon Ball only get stronger when they realize there's a higher high to strive for. Sure, they can reach their limit, but they're not going to burst through unless they have a reason to. Despite being leagues behind the likes of Piccolo and Goku when they fought Raditz, Krillin, Yamcha, and Tien were all able to get stronger than even Raditz in only a year. But after that point, they only got a little bit stronger than that. They didn't surpass Vegeta and Nappa because they couldn't. It wasn't based on plot, it was based on the way power scaling works in the series. Although the same thing applies here, negatively for Goku. Sure, it's only a tournament, but I have a hard time saying he'd even win this match. Remember, the same thing I said about Krillin applies to Tien here too, so it's a weaker Goku and a stronger Tien. Although, considering Goku did fight the likes of Tambourine and other spawn of Piccolo, I'm going to give it to him. He did train with Kami for 3 years after fighting people who were nearly as strong as Piccolo. So it's much more hard fought, although Goku does end up winning. And on to our next match of the tournament, you versus Kami. It appears as if it's just some random dude, some Joe Schmo in the crowd who just so happens to be a random girl's dad. You would hear the little girl cheering from the stands. Go daddy, kick that guy's butt. Please don't take that out of context. But then you would reveal that this isn't her father. Realizing he's caught, Kami would begin shivering in his timbers. What are you even talking about? I'm not God. What does that even mean? But then, with lightning fast speed, you would punch him straight in the gut, or at least attempt to. Although Kami would be able to react, catching your fist. You would say there's only a handful of people alive who'd be able to survive that kind of attack, let alone be able to react to it in record time. He's been caught in his lie dead on, so Kami escapes the body before telling you that now is their only chance to take down Piccolo. He would then look over to the stands and blast off Piccolo's mask, revealing him to the masses. People would begin rioting, shouting all sorts of profanities while trying to get to the Green Man and attack him, although you let off a smirk. Everything with an eye shot would begin to be encased in a green glow as you put your hands in a certain formation, then linking them apart and time would begin to rewind. You weren't too great at shooting lasers out of your hands or anything just yet, although you were able to master a couple other cool tricks taught to you by Master Roshi's sister, Baba. You were also able to make yourself a fine set of weighted clothing, taking the same idea Goku had of using Master Roshi's training in a more efficient manner. Speaking of, once time has rewound to the spot you wanted, you would take off those very weights, before then going and lunging at Kami, who has just released from the man's body. Once you've got up and put him in a chokehold, you would teleport to Kame House, where you would stay for the next 10 seconds, waiting for the time to be up and for the announcer to count both of you disqualified. Goku is Kami's heaviest hitter, and now that the Guardian of Earth isn't a part of the tournament, there's no way the Saiyan's going to go for jumping Piccolo. Not that he would normally, although now it's for certain. And so you'd bring Kami into the house and sit him down on the couch. You and Kami would sit there eating some chips while watching the tournament. There was no way you're gonna let him out of your sight, that way he can go and ruin Piccolo's big day. I guess technically it is his birthday, but on top of that, it's also the day he gets introduced to the other Z fighters, and they have the best chance at accepting him for who he is, rather than the sins of his father. From this point on, the tournament continues pretty much like in the original, although with the only real difference being that Piccolo doesn't fight Kami because you already did that. Both you and Kami were disqualified, so Piccolo just goes straight to the finals. Interestingly enough, Goku and Piccolo would still have their fated battle at the end of the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai. The only difference is Piccolo would win. Like I mentioned earlier, Goku would be a little bit weaker than he was before, although Piccolo has spent the last 3 years training with an actual sparring partner, rather than just on his own. It should be noted that the fight would be much more friendly than in the original. There would be no killing intent from either side, seeing as both of them have no reason to dislike the other. If anything, Goku might dislike Piccolo more than the other way around, given everything with Tambourine and the rest of Piccolo's spawn. Although, since Piccolo Jr. isn't his dad and Goku can clearly see that, the two would have a pretty friendly fight, although Piccolo does still win. He wouldn't have been outright questioned as to who he was until the very end of the tournament. He would be declared the champion, and then, as his hands in the air next to the referees, he would take off his mask, revealing his identity to the world. Kami would stand up, preparing to teleport back to the arena, that way he can confront Piccolo and make sure nothing horrible happens. He's afraid of a Majin Vegeta situation occurring, although you tell him that's not gonna happen, before grabbing him by the cape and setting him back down on the couch. He calls you a fool, before then asking if you truly are not scared of the consequences of letting the Demon King run free, to which you say, not even a little. You gesture towards the TV, showing that people are cheering Piccolo, not booing or attacking him, and Piccolo is accepting it welcomingly. You explain to Kami that most people would rather be loved than feared, and he would have already known this if he spent more time around the people that he tries so desperately to protect. You say that there are no good guys and bad guys, only those already on the right path and those who need a push to get there. You then teleport back to the tournament arena with Kami, intent on introducing him to the world that even though he's still living, he gave up his life in guarding. After only about a week, you and the rest of the Z Fighters would have already blown all the prize money on just having a jolly good time. And since there's not going to be another tournament for 3 years and you don't feel like mooching off of Master Roshi any more than you have, you decide to spend some time with the richest woman on Earth. I'm kidding, money isn't the only factor, although I'd be lying if I said it wasn't at least a pretty big one. Either way, over the last couple of months, you and Bulma did still hit it off. So when you were at your lowest, Bulma offered to help you back on your feet, and that turned into something pretty serious. And believe it or not, one snowy night during December when you and Bulma were watching Elf, a true miracle happened. You two held hands and suddenly she was pregnant. There's obviously a more adult way of this going down, although I'll leave that part up to your imagination. For now, you two have a kid on the way, and I'll leave it up to the comments as to what they're called.